Many of us have faced a very common problem in the classroom, and that is student forgetfulness. How do we combat that concept of students forgetting important information that has been taught? There's a brain-based strategy that we can utilize throughout our instructional practices. That practice is retrieval. Retrieval refers to students remembering information. What research has shown us is that there is a forgetting curve, that after a few minutes or a short period of time, we tend to forget information that has been presented to us. As time passes, we forget more and more of those details, unless we go back and specifically remember that information. How do we incorporate this concept into the classroom? The idea is to have students revisit or review or retrieve information in their brain that they've learned previously. This can be done right away. For example, you teach a chunk of information, and at the end of the day or at the end of class, ask students to summarize some of those key points and details that they learned. However, it's more effective if we allow a little bit of forgetting time between when we presented the information and when we have students retrieve that information. Having them jot those down, sketch those details that they have forgotten, will help to strengthen those memories within their brain, those pathways and neurological connections within their brain. Over time, this will add up. The concept here is around providing students a quiz around the content that's been studied. But it's different from traditional quizzes. In traditional quizzes, students would be punished if they didn't remember the information. Retrieval is a practice that enhances learning. So we don't want to make it a high-stakes quiz. Rather, we want to encourage students to remember what it is that they have learned, and then fill in some of the details that they may have forgotten. This allows us the opportunity to utilize this information as formative assessment as well. What do students remember? What are some of those key details that they've forgotten and that we need to review more deeply? Let's look at a couple of different scenarios and how we can incorporate retrieval within a BEGLAD unit. You may be talking about some specific information within your grade level and content area. Providing students with comprehensible input through a graphic organizer input chart or a pictorial input chart. After you've taught them a chunk of information within one of those charts, ask students to recall the information that they learned yesterday. You will review that information with the word card review. The next day, what you might do is ask students to retrieve some of that information through a learning log, for example. Now, there are a couple of different ways that you might do that. You might have them look back at the chart and recall the information, but even more powerful, you might cover up the information just temporarily and ask them to retrieve that information. What do you remember about that chunk of information that we discussed yesterday or last Friday? This can be challenging for some students as they have lots of other things going on in their lives. Perhaps a lot of things have happened since they learned that information. However, the practice of thinking back, retrieving the information is extremely powerful. It strengthens the connections and neurological pathways within the brain as they go back to remember that key information, to move that information from short-term memory into long-term memory. This provides a little bit of time for students to begin to forget some of that information, but then go back and remember and retrieve it. Other options include giving students a quick quiz. Now, students have time and time again said that they do not like pop quizzes. However, we can let them know that each Tuesday, for example, we will be doing a quick quiz. You can provide students with some questions. You can give them a prompt such as share 3 key details or 3 to 5 key details about what we've been discussing. You'll have to tailor the questions based on your class, grade level, and content area. Retrieval practice should not be high stakes. Rather, it should be an opportunity for students to really dig deep and remember what it is that they have learned. Make sure you make that clear to your students, that they know that this is an opportunity for them to determine what is it that I remember and that I truly know and have integrated now into my learning, and what are those parts that I still need to learn a little bit more about. Towards the end of a unit, you might provide students with a blank process grid. and ask them to fill in as many details as they can about one of those rows, or perhaps even several of those rows. They may remember more about what they studied about in the expert groups, for example. However, we want them to remember the information that they learned from their peers as well. This gives students an opportunity to retrieve that information and transfer it into longer-term memory. We can also ask students to utilize their mind's eye to sketch the visuals that they remember from the information that was presented. This is a different modality, but still integrates the concept of retrieving the critical information that students should remember over time. Retrieval practices are relatively simple and really don't require a lot of preparation on the part of the teacher. Within retrieval, you can provide feedback opportunities for students as well. For example, begin by asking students to remember what's been studied yesterday or perhaps last week. Have them write down everything that they can remember. Give them a short period of time to do so. They might sketch, they might write down some key words, write a paragraph. It depends. After they've written down or recalled information, then review that information with them. Help them to determine what was it that you remembered and what key details did you forget. Utilized consistently, it helps students build those skills of remembering and retaining information, which of course we all want as teachers. Ask students to recall the most critical facts, the essential understandings from the particular strategy, the particular content concepts, the particular skills that you're presenting in class. Let's watch one example of retrieval practice in action in a classroom. What you're going to do in a moment is go back to your tables and write in your learning log. Now, what I want you to do though is retrieve the information that we learned previously. So what I'm going to do is take this piece of paper and cover up our chart. What you'll have to do is really dig into your brain and your memory, all of that information that we learned about Virginia, and write down and sketch as much as you can. All of the key details that you remember from our work together as we learned about this particular colony. When I give you the signal word, head back to your tables and get out your learning log. Ready? Colonies, colonies.